I'm Karaleigh Garrison, and this is Seeking Sunshine, where we are going to find the positive in the trials of life. 'Cause I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine. Oh, 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 I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine. I'm Karaleigh Garrison, and welcome back to Seeking Sunshine. Today we get to talk to an incredibly inspiring person. My friend Natalie Hawkins is here to tell us her story. It is an incredible honor to call Natalie my friend, and I am just amazed and inspired at how much she loves and cares for her little boy. It's so great to have you here. Welcome, Natalie.
Good to see you too. Hi. Well, Alexander was born at 35 weeks. I went in for a normal ultrasound, and there's no problems with the pregnancy. Everything was going just fine. I have an older daughter, by the way, so I had Amelia. She was completely normal pregnancy. Had her actually on her due date right before midnight. So I had like a total normal birth with her, and so that's what we were expecting with Alex. And 2 weeks before this ultrasound at 35 weeks, I had called my doctor because I had felt decreased movements, and that's like a red flag for most moms. And so I called, and they said, "Oh, well, you're still feeling him, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm still feeling him move. It's totally fine. I'm still feeling him kick and all that stuff." I said, "Yeah, it's just decreased. It's not as much." And they said, "Well, you're 35 weeks. You know, he's bigger. You're probably not going to feel him as much. He's probably getting less room to move around." And I was like, "Oh, okay, no problem." And went in for they said, "You have an ultrasound coming up anyway, so we're not going to worry about it." And I said, "Oh, okay." We had a normal ultrasound, and they weren't showing me the screen. So I knew something was up when that happened. And of course, the ultrasound tech can't tell you anything because he's just the tech. And I'm sitting there going, "Okay, but you're not showing me the screen." And he's like, "Well, I need to call your doctor." And I was like, "Oh, fun." And I thought he was just coming early or something, like, because I had decreased movement. I thought I started having Braxton Hicks and all that stuff. So I thought well, maybe he's coming early. So, and they're just trying to tell me, hey, we're going to need to, talk to you about possibly having him today or something. Well, he said, "You need to go to the emergency room right now. They're waiting for you." And I was like, "Oh crap." And he's like, "And your doctor will be there in a minute." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So me and my mother-in-law, who was with me at the time, and she had the kids. And so she took me to the ER, got me set up, and then had the parents come get the kids. And then we called my husband right away. This is towards the afternoon, and I've been admitted at this point, and no one can tell me anything. So it's been a couple hours because you're getting admitted, you're going through the process, and no one has said anything because the doctor hasn't been there yet. So they admit me, and he says, "You have infant hydrops fatalis is what it's called." And I was like, "Okay, what is that?" He said, "Well, there comes a point in the birthing system and when you're pregnant that the fluids are supposed to go through his body, and he's supposed to start becoming a human being and processing it himself and doing all that stuff." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, he apparently never did it. He's been storing all of his fluid that's supposed to be going through his body and becoming nutrients and going back out, has been storing into his body cavities and his skin. And it's uncommon. This is a very rare problem. This normally happens at 23 to 21 weeks, and you have a miscarriage. Most babies don't actually go past that point."
Wow.
Yeah. So they're not sure how they didn't catch it, because you normally catch it on very early, and your body normally tries to miscarry them on its own, but my body didn't. It just decided to keep him. So, so they said, we're gonna have to do an emergency C-section, but we're gonna try and give him the best chance he has, because that he's not going to make it. I said my doctor was just like, he's not gonna. We don't think at all. So we're just prepping you. And I'm like, "Nope, no problem at this point." I'm like, "Okay." And they said, "So you're going to get all these injections. You're going to stay overnight here. And then you're going to get transferred to Sacramento because they have to do it there because they are specialists in it." And I was like, oh, okay. So I have the injections.
Just like still in total shock at that point, I'm sure.
Well, okay, here's the thing. Everyone thought I was in shock because of that. And I'm as you know, I'm religious. So I just went, I had my Bible with me, and I had a mother-in-law who's also religious. And right at first, and my husband's, doing his thing, trying to keep it together best he can, to be there for me and trying to process this whole thing too. And I got a scripture when I was in the hospital, and it was Ruth 2, chapter 12. And it has to do with the Lord rewarding you for what you've been through. Is what that says in that scripture. And so I'm like, okay, so I had complete peace that no matter what happened, it would be okay. So it's, you hear that, that peace, that undescribable peace that he gives you. I had that because I was just like, okay, no matter what comes of what's about to happen, it's going to be okay. And that's
where amazing. That is such a blessing.
Yeah. And it was, I didn't know how to describe it. I still don't know how to describe it to people. Joy recognized it. She was like, you were just totally calm and peaceful. And like, it's because I knew no matter what happened, I'd be okay. It was going to be okay.
Well, and that feeling of like, no one will look at me, no one will tell me what's going on is just the worst feeling.
Yeah, because I was in the hospital. They kept me overnight, and they just told me like, he's not going to survive birth, but we're going to try. Like that week, they had to keep me overnight because that was the preparation. Was that because the injections were steroids? They literally pumped me full of steroids because of the lungs at that point were underdeveloped. And so if you give you steroids, sometimes it will like jumpstart the lungs. And so they were pumping me full of steroids, trying to get him to be able to breathe when he came out. Yeah. So that's what, and it was 24-hour process to just give him the best chance when he came out, even though they were already prepping me and Alan for like, he's not going to make it, because that's what they're supposed to do. I'm very thankful for that. I liked my doctor for that. Well, then I got transferred the next morning, and he's still alive at this point. They reassured me he still has a heartbeat. He's still alive. That's not the issue. The issue is when he comes out. And I'm like, okay. I didn't know how to do it any other way. I kept my humor in all of it. And the nurses are more than happy to facilitate that. They're all about that. If you really get to know nurses, that's kind of a lot of them. Some of them are not nice, but most of the ones I had were great. So I get there and they get the IVs. I've never had a surgery either. So this was my first surgery ever.
Oh, no.
I've had epidurals before with Amelia, and I've had, IVs and blood drawn and all that stuff. I've never broken a bone, well, unless you count my hand, but it was not that bad. So this is like a first major thing for me. I had, when I went in, once they got me going, got me prepped, because it was all really quick. So now they got the motion going. They got it going. I met my surgeon, and she's talking to me. She goes, "We're going to get him out. This is the plan." And I was like, okay. I'm still sitting there like, it's just like, whatever. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's okay. Because they had prepped us that, this is going to be okay. And I was like, okay. So they told me that once I get the epidural, it's going to go really quick. They said they can't take it. It's going to be, you're going to lie down. We're going to strap you down for, we have to strap you down. And I said, no problem. That doesn't scare me. And so they put it in, they lean me back, and they started, right? And everything just started. And I couldn't see him. I wasn't allowed to, right? Because of what they were about to do. Alan got to watch. Alan was there during this whole thing. Alan got to watch. The incision they made was nice and pretty. And then he couldn't come out the rest of the way. He was swollen so big. So they took snippers and sniffed me the rest of the way, because they had broken the water at that point, and you could hear them talking, and they said, we have to cut more. And so I felt that one, because I felt the tug. She just snipped the rest of the way to get him out, because they needed to get him out. And I was like, okay. And still couldn't see him. But Alan saw him, and it was pretty bad. He looked like a Michelin man, for lack of a better word to put it. He was so swollen, you couldn't see his face. He looked like you could barely identify that it was a being. It had toes and fingers. It was so swollen, and he's purple, and it was just really bad. Wasn't breathing. They kind of got him stabled and they rushed him across the room. They didn't even go up before they rushed him across. And I'm still there and they're still working on me. And they're still working on me. They're still working on me. And Alan's sitting there going back and forth between him and me. Because the nurse is talking to me at this point. She's like, "Are you okay?"
That had to be so traumatic for him.
Yeah, it was. I can't tell his story, but it was not good for him. He came back and he checked on me, and because the nurse is talking, "Are you okay? Do you feel anything? Do you feel numb? Do you feel cold?" And I thought it was all normal. She was talking to me to keep me awake because I was losing blood. So she was keeping everything calm, and they were trying to stop the bleeding, and it wasn't stopping. So
you were hemorrhaging?
Yeah, really bad. And so she's trying to keep me awake. And I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel cold or nothing. I was fine. I didn't think there was anything wrong. I was just talking and doing just fine. So she's trying to keep me conscious and making sure I wasn't going to pass out. Alan didn't know that at this point. Alan was just going back and forth. And then she looked at Dad. She goes, "You know what? She's okay. Go stay with him." And he said, "Okay, you sure?" I go, "Yeah, babe, I'm fine. I'm okay." So he went and just stayed at that point with Alex. And Alex died 4 times before they finally got him stable. And what got him stable was the main nurse that was in charge kind of froze because of the sight of him. She didn't know how to handle it. And so another person pushed her out of the way and started to do, the normal respiratory, like trying to get him to breathe and to keep going into suction. Because what happens is with the hydrops fatalis, the fluid that's in his body cavity is also filled up his lungs. So they're trying to pump suction, literally needles in him, pulling out fluid, trying to get fluid out of his lungs so that he can breathe.
So he's drowning, basically.
He's drowning in body fluids. Yeah. Yeah. So they're trying to get him to breathe and keep him stable because, again, once the lungs collapse, it's really hard to get them to open back up and stay stable. And that's what they're trying to do at this point. And then his fluid was all around his heart, so his heart wasn't beating properly. So they're trying to do all this at once. There's a lot of chaos going on, apparently. This is from Alan's side, but he said heart surgeons came in with an ultrasound and were putting in needles and suctioning in certain sections to get the fluid away from his heart, to get it to start beating on its own. So he died 4 times within the process of them trying to keep him stable. And Alan said that Joy, they thought they had him stable at one point, so they brought Joy in because Joy was there, and Joy was helping Alan deal with what was going on because Alan's watching this whole thing. Because we didn't want him to die by himself. So we had Alan in there, and they allowed Alan to be in there. And then they have the CPS people there who said, "Do you want them to stop and do you want to hold him?" And Alan was like, "No." And yeah, that's what Alan said. And about
don't stop. Goodness gracious, don't stop.
Yeah. And then about the 3rd or 4th time that the lady asked him, Alan was about to get really upset at that person. So at that point, Joy stepped in and says, "Look, he won't not touch the baby if he dies. Will you please just let them do their job and stop asking us?" And she stepped in. So finally the CPS lady stopped talking to Alan. Because that was she was worried. The CPS was worried that we weren't going to properly mourn if we didn't hold him, type of situation. Because they didn't know if he was going to make it or not. So, because he had died 4 times at that point. So, they were doing their job, but Alan was just like, "Leave me alone and let me watch this, leave me alone and let me figure this out, So, best of intentions. But the last time that he got stable, Alan came back to me, and I'm still in the operating room. Right before they went to go move Alex up to the upper room because they had finally got him stable enough to move him to the NICU, and that took a little while of him not dying. So Alan came back to me and he goes, "Babe, I think he's really deformed. I can't see any eyes. His ears are cauliflower. He doesn't have a mouth self-cleft. You can't even see a nose." He was all upset. I'm laughing. It's so horrible. I look at him and I go, "Honey," he goes, "I don't think he has eyes." And I go, "Honey, the eyes are developed at 20 weeks. He has eyes. You just can't see them." And he goes, "But he looks like he looks really deformed, honey. I don't know." And I'm like, "Babe, he's swollen. Once the fluid goes down, he'll be okay. Is he okay?" He's like, "Yeah, they got him stable. They're going to move him." I'm like, "Okay." And the nurse is sitting there trying not to laugh too. We're both trying not to laugh because we're just like, he's so panicked, and we're just trying to calm him down. But the way he was describing Alex was like this, the thing from Hey You Guys. That's all I imagined in my brain, and my brain went there, and I was like, "Oh, this is not good." So I was like, I go, Alan, even if he is deformed, it's okay, honey. We're just one step at a time. I go, he's breathing, right? He goes, yeah, he's breathing. I'm like, okay, that's a good step. They told us he wasn't going to breathe. Okay. And he's like, yeah. And then the nurse comes and hey, Alan, we're moving. And so he said, I gotta go. And it's okay. So Alan went up to NICU, and they kept working on Alex, right? Just keeping him breathing.
Breathing is pretty important.
Breathing is pretty important. Yeah. And that's all that was. That for the first 24 hours was keeping him breathing, keeping his lungs open and breathing. Well, and while that's was the goal of the NICU, was to keep him breathing, whether that's with machines, whether that was with oxygen, however they had to do it, the goal was to keep Alex breathing for 24 hours. Because they believe that if they kept him breathing, that his body would kickstart and start to do it on its own, because he wasn't doing it on his own. His heart was beating on its own fine now, but he wasn't breathing on his own, but his heart was beating. So he had a good chance of doing okay for a while. How long, they didn't know. So meanwhile, in the surgery room, and it's taking a long time, and I'm not realizing how long it's taking. I'm not keeping track of time. And Joy is right there, and she's realizing that I've been in the operating room for a long time at this point. And they think Joy's my mom because she looked a lot like me. My mom was there, but she was, dealing with her own way. And Joy was right there, and my mom was pretty much like a wreck, and they didn't want to just talk to her because they didn't want to make it worse for her. So they talked to Joy, and they looked at Joy and said, "You're the mother, right?" And they nodded her head, and she's like, "No, yeah." In-law, underneath her breath, and she goes, "Okay, come with me," because they didn't want to upset my mom any further. And they pulled Joy aside, and they said, "Look, she's not doing well. She's seeming fine." He goes, "But whatever caused Alex to be sick is in her. She now has it, whatever it is. And they're worried about me turning sepsis really quick. They're trying to prevent it. And they said she's lost a lot of blood, and they're keeping an eye on me, but they don't know." They said, we're monitoring her, and we wanted to let somebody know in the family, that we're watching her, and it's not good." And she said, "Okay." She said, "So just be aware." And we're like, "All right." Sorry, he's really goofy this morning. Joy's dealing with the knowledge of I might die from whatever's going on, and Alex might die at the same time. So she's prepping herself to help Alan at this point. So I was shaking uncontrollably coming down from the anesthetics, and that wasn't normal. And I remember my mom and dad coming in the room, and my dad's like, "Can you feel this?" I'm like, "No." "Can you feel that?" "No." But what I thought was normal talking, apparently I was like, So I was shaking uncontrollably and having a reaction to the anesthetic also on top of what was going on. I'm still just sitting there going, "She says I can get moved in a minute. They're just watching me." And the nurse goes, "Yep, we're just watching her. She's okay." She's just like.
So did you have an epidural with Amelia?
I did. And I didn't have any problems. So they were kind of taken back, like they didn't know why I was having such a bad reaction to it. And the whole point with me is to keep me awake. They were just keeping me talking and keeping me awake and making sure I wasn't going to pass out. And that him was breathing, me was keeping me awake. So I stabilized after probably about 8 hours of that. I finally stabilized, and they moved me to the high intensity unit.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that long.
Did they make you stay awake then for that whole 8 hours?
Yeah, they did, because I wasn't.
Which is brutal, because it was already.
Yeah.
Was it evening? Yeah. It was already evening, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was. Yeah, it had to be like, I think I didn't get placed in my room until it was like midnight or 1 a.m.
Well, and that had to be just exhausting because of after your crazy day. So trying to keep you awake, they were fighting more than one battle.
Yeah, and I wanted to see Alex, and I wasn't. They said, "No, you can't move right now. You had to stay lying down. You cannot get up." And I was like, "Okay." They told me when I go to move, if Alex is stable enough, they'll let me roll by him so I could see him. And that wasn't able to happen because what was happening with Alex, he couldn't get moved. Where he got moved to the NICU, and he was staying there.
Were you able, like, was your husband able to take pictures or anything and send them to you?
Yeah, he didn't send it to me because of the way Alex looked. He took a couple of pictures, and then he still has those first pictures, and they're not even as bad as the very first time he saw Alex. Because after a couple hours, the swelling, they started, draining all the fluid, and he finally started to go down. So Alan took like 2 pictures of him when he was pretty swollen still, but not as bad as he was. So yeah, I stabilized, and they were still had me for 3 days. I was on the high intensity unit for watch because they were still watching for sepsis, because whatever had caused him to not process his fluids, my body was now starting to do that. And I was starting to pool my legs. And so they were watching if my body was going to start being okay, or if they were going to have another situation on their hands. But after about 2 days, I remember when and they still didn't tell me I didn't know any of this was going on at the time, like the whole 3 days until the beginning of the third day, end of the second day. Then one of the nurses came in and looked at me and said, "Look, you're not passing fluids. You need to pass fluids. This is the problem we're having." And I'm like, I can't make my body do it. I was like, "I don't know what you want from me." She's like, "No, I'm just making you aware because no one's telling me what's going on for real." I was like, "Oh." She's like, "Your body is not processing fluids, and you need to start processing them." And that's what we're looking to us today. If you don't process some fluids, we're going to be doing something else. And I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, fortunately, I started processing my fluids, and I started doing okay. And I was just fine. As soon as I started essentially going to the bathroom, peeing, and doing my thing, I was starting to be okay. So yeah. On top of this, I have a C-section scar that I'm dealing with because I've never had that before.
Brutal. Were they trying to make you get up and walk?
No.
And stuff?
Yeah. They were coming in and pushing on me.
Okay.
Yeah. No, because my legs were swollen. I wasn't allowed to walk. They didn't want me dispersing the fluids into the wrong places. So I wasn't allowed to get up and walk for the 2 days. Once I started going and the fluids started moving, then I was allowed to get up. And I wanted to get up at that point. But then I realized they really didn't want to.
I bet it was super painful.
I sneezed also, and it found that hilarious. Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. I knew from stories of other moms with C-sections that
don't sneeze. Don't sneeze. Don't sneeze.
And I sat up in bed because I was going to the bathroom every couple of minutes because I had to go. And so, because they had been pumping me full of fluids trying to flush me. So I sat up, and I knew I had to sneeze, and I knew to place the pillow over there. I had like 2 girdles on at this point too. So I knew to place the pillow over my stitches. So I placed the pillow over my stitches, and I went to sneeze, and I sneezed and I screamed.
I bet.
And I woke Alan up. He wakes up thinking there's something horribly wrong. He goes, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I'm crying, and I'm like weeping. I'm like, I sneezed. And he starts laughing.
Dude, that is like so painful. That is like so insanely painful.
Yeah, I pushed the nurse button, and she comes running in because I haven't been asking for painkillers right at this point because I don't like doing that, and so I've been trying to like not take the painkillers. And so she comes in at this point, and she's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I go, "I sneezed." She said a cuss word. She goes, "Oh, shit." She goes, "Lay down." And Alan's like, "Wait, what? Were you serious?" She goes, "Yeah, she could split open. You don't understand." And he's like, "Oh." So we lay it down, and she goes, "Oh,
did you pop a stitch? Did you pop a stitch? Are your guts spilling all over the floor?" Yeah, that's what sneezing's like after a C-section.
Yeah, after C-section, yeah. And so she lay down. She's, "Oh, there's no blood." She goes, "Okay, you're fine. You did." She goes, "You're fine." She goes, "Did you hold yourself?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did." She goes, "Okay." And she looks at me. She says, "Do you want some painkillers now?" And I was like, "Yes, please."
"Give me the drugs, please."
I was like, "I'd like some now." And she laughed with me. So, that was different. On the third day too, because I was processing my fluids now, I was able to go see Alex. I was still in a wheelchair. They still didn't want me walking very far. So Alan wheelchaired me up to finally see Alex. I didn't see Alex for the first 2 days. I didn't see him.
That's awful.
Yeah.
That is like so painful.
Yeah. So then after the first 2 days, I went up and I saw him. We weren't allowed to touch him because of the...
his skin was probably really delicate from being so swollen.
Yeah, and that's what they said. They said didn't know if he was going to peel and look like a burn victim, because they said sometimes their bodies will peel the outer layer, but then you have to wrap them up and they'll look like a mummy. And they said, they said, we don't know if that's going to happen, but they said, we're prepping for that. So just so you know, if he looks like a mummy, it's because he had peeled. Well, he never peeled. So we were all really thankful for that. Swelling went down slow enough that he never peeled his skin. He was fine. So, he was on all sorts of machines at that point, and keeping him alive. And he just kind of slowly kept going. Every day was fluids, checking how much fluids he was processing, if his kidneys were going to work properly, everything that goes on with his eyes, and just how he was failure to thrive 2 weeks into the NICU, because he wasn't processing food still. His body was just processing anything for him was really hard at the beginning. So his body wasn't gaining weight. He was losing weight drastically because his body wouldn't take the nutrients in still, even though he was out of me.
Well, were they counting like how much extra weight he had from all the fluids he was retaining?
Yeah, he was supposed to be like 1 pound, 6 ounces, and he was 10 pounds of fluid.
Whoa.
Yeah. That his body needed. That's the fluid that you need to be a human being that he lost. Yeah. So they were watching all of that. Because what they were pumping out of him was electrolytes and enzymes and minerals. They were taking it out of him because it wasn't going where it was supposed to go, which is your muscles and your brain and your kidneys and your organs. It was coming out of him through his chest cavity, because they found out that the fluid would start to back up in his skin and then it'd fill up his chest cavity. So they had drainage tubes in his chest cavities for the first 2 months. Yeah, 2 months. The first 2 months of his life, he had chest tubes. Yeah.
That's got to be super dangerous to have fluid in your chest like that.
Yeah, that's what they were watching. Yeah. And, but in the NICU, he had a person with him 24/7. And I went every day. I wasn't allowed to stay overnight. So they got to know me in the NICU, because I went every day. I went down every single day. I wasn't going to not be there. And,
so were you driving 45 minutes from home every day, which double that? So an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Holy
and I did
cow.
their first thing they let me in at 6 a.m.
Because you got released before he did.
Yeah. And I got to go home at midnight. I could leave the NICU at midnight. They made me.
How did Amelia do through all this? Because how old was she?
She was 2. 3. She was 3.
That had to be super hard on her too.
Yeah. And she had Pappy and Granny and my mom. My mom came here and kind of helped out a lot with kind of filling the mommy's not here kind of gap thing. And, but I just wanted, because in the NICU, everything changes literally every 8 hours, because they have cycling doctors. So the doctor would come on during the day and then come on at night. So the doctor would be there for the day doctor. And then at night, a night doctor would come on. And if I wasn't there, I'd have them call me when the new doctor came on, because they'd brief you about what's going on that night and then what's going on that day. Because literally it's every 8 hours they're keeping him alive, is what this was.
That had to be just exhausting for you. And like doing all that driving after a C-section, and like still, I mean, it took me at least a month before I could like walk anywhere close to normal again after mine. So I imagine yours was at least as bad.
Yeah, I kind of, my mental state was not on myself. I guess that's what helped. It was on Alex. Like, I just wanted to be there for him. And I wanted to be there to make sure he was okay. And if he died, I wanted to be there. I didn't want to, and I hated going home.
You were seeking the sunshine. He was your sunshine, and you were seeking him. That's amazing. That focusing on him and that beauty and that joy of your new baby was able to help you forget about the C-section pain. Because I've been there, and that C-section pain is no joke.
It's no joke. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't want to go home, and I was awaiting that call in the middle of the night to say, he passed. I was waiting for that, but I never got that phone call. And then I got to hold him at 1 month old, 2 months old, right on the cusp of 2 months. Actually, I got to hold him for the first time. So, they gave me he was hooked up to still all these breathing machines, and, he was able to come off of what they call the shaker machine. It was the machine that kind of like shook him constantly, because when you shake, it keeps your lungs from collapsing on themselves. So he was on that machine for the first month and a half. And when he was stable enough to come off of that machine, then we were allowed to hold him because he could be stable off of that machine. So that was a milestone. That was great. I got to do skin to skin for the first time and all that stuff. You get to know the other moms in the NICU, and then you realize when babies don't go home, because there's a missing bed, but there's still parents. So that was not fun. I saw that quite a bit walking by. So, because we were in the high intensity unit. So the high intensity unit, most kids don't make it out of there. So we got to visit other parents that were there sometimes and talk to them with their stories. And nobody was us though. We were kind of unique in ours. Like most of them were like twins that were born really early, drug babies that were born really early. One baby was born with the intestines on the outside, and it was in a bag on the outside. It was a malformity in the baby. I don't think that one made it, but it was there for a couple of weeks with the parents. So
was that like really lonely, or did it still feel like you had people who understood?
I feel like more with seeing the parents go back and forth, because we all kind of looked like zombies. Like all you could tell the parents from the doctors, even though we all wore hospital gowns up there. You can tell because they just look like they've been through hell, and then when they see another person that's not a doctor or a nurse, we kind of like go, "Hi, how are you? Are you okay?
Let's communicate.
What are you in here for?
What are you in for? Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. And then and you get others who don't want to talk at all, who are definitely, just
devastating.
Yeah, devastating. They're just kind of there. But there wasn't too many of those. I think I've only came across 2 parents that are like that up there. The rest were like really happy to see other people.
I bet that was really nice to have anyone to talk to. And I bet that's super lonely sitting in the NICU.
Yeah. And then we came up to, how long was he up there? He was up there for 3 months. And then when he reached that stage, he was no longer considered a newborn. So he has to get out of the NICU. He had to go down to the PICU.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah. And so we had a new transition. Now, this one was completely different and very unique in that in the PICU, there's not a nurse sitting by him 24/7. They do rounds like a normal hospital. So they can see, they have the monitors. It's glass window doors. So it's the PICU. So it's a high intensity PICU floor. So you're not like in a room with a closed door, but he's in a like looks like a glass box room, because their whole front door is clear so they can see what's going on as the nurses walk by. But a nurse is assigned 3 kids and per nurse. And so she's got to make her rounds and she's got to check on the other kids. And each kid has different needs normally. So, but we're allowed to stay overnight at that point. So now we can stay 24/7 with him if we would like. So that was the option. When I got moved down to the PICU and I saw how he was going to be taken care of after being in this high intensity, high need, he was stable enough. He was never off of oxygen or a breathing machine. We tried a couple times to wean him off of it, but it never worked. He failed every single time. When we saw what was going to be going on in the PICU, we decided that I wasn't going to leave him down there. That'd be like leaving your kid at the hospital. It's literally what it'd be like. And I'm like, I can't do that. I can't leave him here. At overnight even, I was like, this is not gonna. So me and Joy made a plan, because I stayed for the first 2 weeks by myself, just me there, and 24/7 taking care of him with his pairs and everything that was going on with him. And he had x-rays daily of his lungs because of he was diagnosed with chronic lung disease, which just meant his lungs were underdeveloped. And then he had chronic pneumonia on top of that, because he ended up having an issue with not wanting to swallow or suck and swallow and have lack of airway protection, which we were all finding out as he was progressing and he was becoming more stable. We were trying to figure out how to help him best stay stable. He began to process food. We found the correct formula for him to be on, and he gained weight, and he consistently gained weight. Then he started processing everything. So he eventually got better. It just took months instead of days. So we just took it one step at a time. So I was there for the first 2 weeks, and then I was dead. I was so burnt out because there's alarms, there's noise, there's...
You don't sleep in the hospital. No one sleeps in the hospital.
Yeah. So, and the nurses were starting to realize that I wasn't okay. I had not CPS, but it's the caseworker. She's not CPS, but she's kind of like their form, the hospital's form of CPS. Then they're not there to do anything but check on you and the baby. Like, make sure you're not fighting with the hospital staff. You're not fighting with the doctors. Everyone's copacetic. That's what they're there. They're their mediator, pretty much. She came up and she's like, you need to do something because you're not sleeping, and we need to do something else than this. And so we discussed it with Joy. So Joy started switching out with me. So, because she was going to be the secondary caregiver if we were ever going to go home there, I needed to have a second person help me take care of him. And so we already knew that Joy was going to be that. So she stepped in, and she was there 3 days a week. So I had 3 days where I could go home, and then I was back on. So we kind of switched off, on and off, at the hospital for the next... He didn't go home until 6 months, and then he went back in. So he came home at 6 months old, and he got discharged pretty much. So how this happened in the hospital, I kept getting mad at the doctors and some of the nurses because of his level of care. He had lack of airway protection, which means that he couldn't swallow. So his spit was going into his lungs and causing chronic lung disease. So it's a new problem we were having now. So we had discussed a trach in the beginning, and I just was holding off on the tracheostomy. I was holding off to see if he'd develop a second swallow. So we had discussed it. We hadn't put it into we're going to do it. So we had discussed it. It had been talked about, and they were kind of pushing for it, but I didn't want to just do it. And so it just took me a minute. Well, then one of the doctors threatened that they'd probably put him in a home if we didn't get a tracheostomy, because we couldn't take him home because of how sick he was. We wouldn't be able to properly take care of him. I didn't go over well because I had a bunch of nurses who loved him.
You cannot threaten that. That's not an okay thing to threaten, especially a parent who has been as devoted as you were that entire time. You cannot threaten that to somebody. Like you just cannot do that. That is not okay.
Yeah, he found that out. He's a little man. And he didn't come in the room after that when he did his rounds. He stopped coming into our room. He'd only talk to the nurses. He wouldn't talk to me anymore. Because I got my mediator involved, and I got involved, and I was like, oh, hell no, we're not doing this. And I agreed to the trach because I had a different doctor other than that doctor come in and say, this is why he needs the trach, and he'd have a better quality of life if he had a trach. And then the one doctor prepped us for, because he was on just a very low type of breathing machine at that point, but not a huge ventilator, which is those ones that breathe for you. They let us know that he could be on a ventilator once he went in and had a trach placed. It has to do with the science of the lungs and how his body worked, that if he got a trach placed, that he could possibly be put on a ventilator and not come off. They said that's a very, very big possibility. And I said, okay, we're ready for that. So he got his trach placed, and we started a whole new adventure of taking care of an open hole to your airway. Oh, buddy.
That had to be so traumatic to gosh, I can totally see why you didn't want to do that for so long.
Yeah, it was a lot. And he already had we had discussed about, because he had been getting IV fluids for food at that point. Not IV fluids. He's been getting nose. The the feeding tube was going down his nose at that point. And so we talked about, we need a G-tube, which is a Mickey button to his stomach. It's a direct line to his stomach, so it bypasses his mouth. Makes it safe for us to go home, so that we don't have a hose going down his nose into his throat. Because if he pulls that hose out that goes down their nose into their stomach, it pulls up into their airway, and it can just dump fluid down into our lungs. And we have no idea, because we don't have x-rays here, to show if he's pulled it out far enough. So it's just safer to have a feeding tube placed in their stomach. So we were going to do the surgeries at the same time. So, which made sense. I was happy all about that. So we got that all placed and got his trach placed, and he stopped being so sick, but in exchange for stop getting so sick because of the chronic lung disease and the pneumonia, now we're able to suction him, which means we take a little tiny, itty bitty little tiny tube and we go into his esophagus, down towards his lungs, and we're suctioning all the goop out. And that was our life after that. Suctioning him, keeping his secretions, or it's a fancy word for spit, out of his lungs. And that keeps him from getting pneumonia.
So is that something you're still doing?
Yes.
And how old is he now?
He's almost 3.
He's almost 3?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Blessing in a trial. I've been saying that one a lot lately.
Blessing in a trial.
Yeah, I mean, it's miraculous that he's alive, but like how much of a trial it is to care for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just what I kept reminding is he's now, every step was he's breathing on his own. He's, he doesn't need that machine. He doesn't need that machine. He doesn't need this machine. Okay, now we got to do two. But every little thing was just exciting to us. But here's the new thing, which I was trying to get to, is that the trach, we had to learn how to do trach changes because you can't keep him in perpetually. You have to change him every week. So you have to learn how to pretty much take the trach out and put the trach in without having issues. And that was a struggle in its own for them to teach us. And we had also other trials. Like they didn't, because we were so attentive to him, and so because we knew so much, because we kept asking the doctors and the nurses everything about what was going on with him, we learned and we became almost like nurses. We feel like we went through a nursing school. But because we were that, the little things they forgot to teach us. So there's a thing called ambu bagging. We went through CPR classes, but the CPR class was not trach specific. So when you do CPR, your mouth is your airway. When you do CPR on a trach kid, that's not his airway. The hole here is his airway. So when you do clear the airway and do chest compressions and breathe through here, that's not how you do CPR on a trach kid. And so we never got taught how to ambu bag him, which is this thing that attaches to his trach and you pump him full of air. And we never got taught that. So when he had a code in the hospital, which he started coding, and poor Joy, it happened on when I wasn't there. Joy was there because it was Joy's day to be there. He turned purple on her and just started dying because she didn't know what to do. And the nurses came, but it happened so quick that it was just instant, because what happened is that if you plug their airway, they don't breathe. With a trach, because it's artificial airway, their secretions can sometimes get stuck and you don't realize it until it becomes a plug. And then it plugs their airway and they instantly start turning blue. And it's called a plug. And so when that happens, you have to do emergency trach change. You pull out the trach and you put a new one in. Well, you have two steps that have to happen before you do that. You have to try to suction down here, not in his mouth. And if you can't suction, it's a plug. And so you have to pull it out. Well, you have to do this in seconds. We were never taught that because it hadn't happened yet.
Well, and this just emphasizes the importance of having somebody with him every second.
Yeah. So once we had that happen, they knew that we needed to be taught on that. So then we got taught on he recovered. They put the trach in, he turned color back. It was seconds that went by. So he was fine. So, they said that can happen at home too. And if that happens, if you go home, so it was still, if you go home, if it happens, this is what you do. So we all got step by step on how to do that. But it was just funny to us at the hospital. It had to be an emergency before they taught us. We could not imagine what would happen if we got home and we didn't realize to do that. It's just little things that they forget to teach you. So once we got the trach placed, he got put on a ventilator because he could not keep his lungs open still. So he got put on a ventilator. Then he got put on a ventilator that he could take home, because the equipment you have in the hospital is not the equipment you can go home with. Two very different types of equipment.
So you have to learn how to use all the new equipment. The home version, the small version.
Yeah. But that was good because it meant we were one step closer to home, because some kids can't make the switch. Some kids can't make the switch from the hospital event to the home event. Some fail to do that. It takes them forever for their bodies to adjust. And it's we were fortunate that it was quick. So then we started the nurses started noticing that he was looking like he wanted to have seizures, and he had muscle spasticity, which meant that he shook a lot because he had muscle control problems, and we didn't know what it was yet. And I said, well, no, he shakes like that. They told me it's a muscle spasticities. They said, no, he's having different movement with this one. And I was like, okay. And so he was having them like back to back to back. And then one nurse says, I'm pretty sure these are seizures. And she goes, I'm almost definite these are seizures. So she brought in the neurologist really quick. And he said, it's a seizure. And I said, well, you're not going to, because normally they hook them up and they try to test their brain. He says, nope, if it looks like a seizure and walks like a seizure, it's a seizure. It's a seizure. So go ahead and dope him up. So they knocked him out. I was not happy.
They didn't test this before?
No, they did. He didn't have them. This was a new development. Yeah. They tested him in the NICU and they did brain scans. And everything was fine.
That's a standard test in the NICU for seizures.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he didn't have them. So that's why I kept saying, I know he just got spasticity. They told me it was spasticity. I've been checked this. And they said, no, it's a seizure. I know it's a seizure. The neurologist was like 100%. So they knocked him out. They doped him up, knocked him out. Because that's what you do to stop the seizure. So once that happened, it was a couple hours later, a different doctor came in, which was Dr. Chetness. Thank the Lord for Dr. Chetness. She is a neurologist who I still have to this day. She came in and she says, I'm not happy what the first neurologist did. She goes, I'm so sorry. She goes, he's already doped up, so there's not much I can do about it now. She said, he's okay. She's thank goodness he has a trach and a ventilator, because how much they gave him, he probably would have stopped breathing. But he's okay. She says, I'm going to hook him up to an EEG. We're going to do a 48-hour.
Ooh, an actual test?
Yeah. And we're going to see what kind of seizure it might have been, or see if there's a problem. And I said, oh, thank God. So she was great. And so she did diagnose him with seizures, and he had what was called epileptic misfires. So he was having small seizures every so many minutes, and it just happened. It just developed. They're not sure why or how. They just know that it did. So she gave him 3 different seizure medications. We adjusted the doses for him. We double checked the signs of seizures, and we got him to a healthy dose where he was still awake and all that stuff, but he wasn't doped up, because that's what I was afraid of. I was afraid they were going to just keep him so sedated that he wasn't going to be a person, So Chetness reassured me that she's kind of anti-medicine. She's anti, she's a neurologist, but she doesn't like to just keep them so drugged up that they can't move. So she was very happy with playing with the line of, okay, he's controlled, but he's not doped up. So I was very fortunate to get her, and she requested him as a patient. She said, I was not put on your case. She goes, I saw him. I saw his case. She goes, I requested him. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, that was a blessing and stuff too. Cause we were like, oh my God, we don't want to have a kid who's just medicated. I didn't want that. I was like, that's not a way to live at all. Let's talk about quality of life, So I would definitely answer a prayer for that one. So Dr. Chetness came on board, and she's still our neurologist to this day. And he actually hasn't had seizure or seizure-like activity for almost a year and a half now.
That's amazing. That's so awesome.
I think he can. They said those types of seizures that he was having, you can outgrow because of the type it is. It's just a part of the brain that grows with time. So they say he can probably outgrow those types of seizures. And it looks like he is, because we are off one of the seizure medications completely. So he's on only 2 now.
So tell me what life looks like now. What's your day-to-day in caring for him?
Much easier than when we first came home. So if you're a new mom and when you go to the grocery store with your new baby, you bring everything in the kitchen sink because you don't know what you're going to be face.
Being a new mom is hard enough as it is, but to have all of that extra equipment, that must just have felt impossible.
I felt like a new mom all over again because I had Amelia and I thought I had it under my belt, but then this one came with medical equipment. You were transporting a small hospital, literally, because when he came home, he still had a lot of issues, and we kind of like forced them to let us go because we kind of like ended up in this like vicious cycle at the PICU of the doctors didn't know what to do. Like he was kind of like he was just staying at the same level of needs and cares, and he wasn't getting any better, but he wasn't getting any worse. He was just really, really stable. Well, some doctors said it was okay for him to go home because we had it. And then the other doctors that were there said, no, she's on too much support with the vent and she has too much oxygen needs. There's no way she can take the kid home. And I refused nursing. I did not want nurses. So when high needs babies like this, when they go home, you can get nurses to come into your home to help you take care of him at night, especially because he has that 24-hour care. He can't be left alone at all, even to sleep. You have to be awake, taking care of him.
Because of that immediate like ability of the plugging and the choking and dying.
And all that stuff. Yeah. So we refused it because I had went to the Facebook group called Moms with Kids of Trachs. And it was a support group. And I was talking to them, and there was good and bad stories, but the bad stories were so scary that I was like, I don't want that on top of having to take care of him. So you're letting a stranger into your home. You don't always get the same nurse. Some nurses love their job and some nurses can't stand their job. They're just there for the money. But it's your kid that they're taking care of. And it's not funny. It's a life and death situation sometimes. And I've heard of one too many kids dying because of the nurse's lack of response. So I was like, we're not going this far to go home for a nurse to screw up. No offense to the nurses. I know there's really great nurses out there. But if anyone's going to screw up, it's going to be me, and it's going to be my fault. It's not going to be anybody else's fault at all. So I was like, no. So that was unprecedented. They don't send kids home with his high extensive need without nursing. We had to make a deal with the doctors that we had 24-hour care for him. So I had to have two caregivers, which was Joy and me, and a third backup, which is Leslie. She's one of our friends. And so we all had to get trained on everything from emergency situations to giving him medication to vent settings to breathing treatments. We all had to spend a week in the hospital with him by ourselves, where the nurses didn't even take care of him. We had to. We were being supervised by the nurses. So we had to stick our head out the door, and say, okay, it's time for his 12 o'clock meds. Can I have them? Because I didn't have access to his meds in the hospital. They came in and gave it to him. But I had to know his schedule. I had to know his feeding schedule. I had to prompt the nurses to give me the stuff I needed to take care of him, to prove that we could take care of him. And actually, any parent who takes their kid home in this situation had to do that. That was standard procedure for the hospitals to train you. You had to do normally it's called a 48-hour stay in or lock in. And it's where you take care of them by yourself 24 hours. So even though I was going to have a person switch out with me at night, because Joey's going to be the night person, I was going to be the day person. I had to take care of him for a week by myself, 24/7. So it made no sense to me, but that's what they wanted, for us to go home without nursing.
Yeah, because that means no sleep for a week.
For each person who wanted to be take care of him. It was insane.
Well, and doing that level of care on no sleep, I have certainly not the level that you have, but my severely autistic Joshua is also diabetic, and I can tell you that like calculating out med dosages and doing that kind of thing when you are sick or exhausted is brutal. And so I can only imagine how hard trying to do a full week without any sleep and all of the intricacies of that, how crazy hard that must be.
They knew if we did that, though, that we could go home and not have a problem. So we were like, okay, we got this. So we did that. We did it. And we got discharged and we got sent home. We had a failed discharge because within 24 hours, we were back at the hospital. So it was a failed discharge because when we got home, his chest, because we changed his environment, his secretions and his chest just started rattling with goop, like mucus. And I almost, because it wasn't an infection yet, but he had dropped secretions, and it's called aspirating. So he had dropped secretions down into his lungs that I couldn't get up. Normally I can get him up with a type of machine it was for COPD patients. It like rattles their chest so you can help get the mucus up. Well, the machine they gave us was for an adult, because now we're at home with home equipment, which is nowhere near the level of hospital equipment at all.
Let's train you at the hospital and then send you home with totally different equipment.
Exactly. And so when we got home, we had a day of a person from the distributing company who came in and said this, like, sped through everything. And we're like, and then she's, okay, call us if you need help. And we're like, sink or swim.
Overwhelming.
Yeah. And they also, some of the hospital staff, like, we kind of knew that they sent him home to die, because we knew we were in the cycle of he's either going to make it or he's not. Like, that's literally what it was. Like, it was a huge cycle of, because he, like I said, he just stabled out and he wasn't moving from that spot. He was just, that was him. And we didn't know if that was going to be him forever or if that was just for right now. But he wasn't moving. In the hospital, it's the picky. You can't stay there forever. You're not supposed to. So because he wasn't progressing or getting worse, we had to do something. They had to do something. So they sent us home to see what would happen. Literally, that's what they did. So they did not expect us to succeed. You could tell when we came back to the hospital within 24 hours. And 2 doctors said we should never send him home. And I was like, yay, this is fun.
That's reassuring.
Yeah. So at this point, miraculously, he was stable, but everyone was fine with where he was at. We brought in a different machine for the shaking. It's called a vest treatment instead of something that slows down him. It's a weird machine. Anyway, so we brought in a proper machine, and I said, am I going home on this machine? And they said, yes, you're going home with the machine. And I love the people who did this machine. It's called a vest treatment. And it's, again, for people who have COPD. It helps get the gunk out of their lungs. Is
that because coughing is not something he's able to do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he can't cough the mucus out. So my insurance wouldn't pay for it. Medi-Cal wouldn't pick it up. I was stuck because I couldn't pay for it. So now I had a new problem. I was okay to go home, but I couldn't afford the equipment.
I cannot even imagine how expensive that would have been.
Oh my God, you put the word medical in front of anything, and it's like instantly $8,000. So the manager and CEO of the company comes in, and they do this often, actually.
Of the company that
makes the machine.
Okay.
And they come in and he says, we understand your situation and we understand your insurance doesn't want to pay for it. You can go home. It's okay. You can take it. And I said, oh, are you serious?
Wow.
And they said, yeah, we understand your situation and we understand this piece of equipment is the only thing holding you here. And that's not okay. And they said, so we're going to give it to you and we'll figure out payment later, but you don't have to worry about it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I was like, wow. And they said they don't do that very often. They do it, but not very often. So I was like, oh my God.
That's incredible. What? That is just amazing.
So that was when we get home with that machine, we never went back to the hospital after that. We actually survived all the sick seasons. We survived all the ups and downs with him after that. So yeah.
That's just incredible.
Yeah. So the only thing now is that once you go home, they want to make sure you're keeping him alive. So for the first 4 months of being home, we had appointments every other week. We had to take him and prove that we could take him and support him when we did stuff. So we had to go to Sacramento every other week to do infant high needs checks, which were 3-hour appointments. Now get this, he was on 5 liters of oxygen, which they agreed to send him home on, but they said you're going to need oxygen, and it takes a lot. So we had a condenser when we came home, which makes oxygen out of the air, makes pure oxygen. That was at home. We had that. So we didn't have to worry about oxygen tanks. When we left the house, the condenser couldn't come with us. It had to be plugged into a home. So we had oxygen tanks. He went through 1 oxygen tank in an hour. And we had to drive 45 minutes to Sacramento, and the appointments lasted for 3 hours.
Holy crap.
So we had to take 4 to 5 oxygen tanks with us just in case. Oxygen's kind of like a bomb, and we live in Sacramento, so we can't leave it in the car.
Wait, what?
So we had to carry the oxygen tanks inside. Yeah, you can't leave the oxygen tank in the car. If it gets hot, it will explode.
Oh my gosh, that part didn't even occur to me.
So we had a stroller that we had to equip with his ventilator, which he couldn't be off of for more than 2 seconds, or he started dropping stats. So he had this hose hooked to him, that hooked to a machine that's external, a hook to the stroller. Then we had 4 to 5 oxygen tanks we had to stick on the stroller or carry. We had a suction machine, which you need to be on. You need to have to suction him out every couple minutes, because that's how you can tell I'm still doing it. I'm still suctioning him out every few minutes.
Yeah, every few minutes because of secretions, because of mucus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all of that had to be mobile somehow and go into a doctor's office and out of a doctor's office.
And trying to get that to like all be on a stroller.
Mm-hmm. And then we have a medical stroller, but we didn't get that for the first year. It took a year for them to get us that stroller because insurance wouldn't pay for it. So, and the same thing, the maker said, okay, insurance is agreeing to pay for it. They're making payments. We're going to have to give you the stroller. But that took 6 months to get. And even that stroller was not big enough for some of his stuff. It had like equipment. You could attach the equipment to it, and they should have had to do it. But it was still had its own unique set of issues.
I always think it's just the cherry on the cake when you have all of this stuff to deal with. And then it's like, oh, hey, you're not allowed to because insurance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I got really familiar with my insurance. What he ended up being diagnosed with, which we didn't know because he had all the genetic testing in the world done in the hospital. And they said there's nothing wrong with him. We don't understand why he is the way he is, until the geneticist went over his genetic code for the 13th time or something like that. And he said, it is a rare genetic disformity called, it doesn't even have a name. LZTR1 is the name of the genetic code that's messed up. It's the name of the gene. Yeah, it doesn't have a name. That's the name of the gene that got messed up. It's one of the 3 major genes that make up the human body, and it is mutated. It's what caused the infant hydrop fatalis. It's what caused him to get sick. It's what caused his body to not process how it's supposed to process. And he said, these babies don't make it. He goes, he should not be alive, because there are a few that have made it past birth, but they have more complications than him. So, and there is 100 unknowns. You don't know if they're going to progress, they're going to get worse, or they're going to die. You don't know. You literally have to take it one day at a time, because they don't have research out there to tell you. The leaders in the research is Johns Hopkins in Boston. They're the leaders in this genetic mutation. So if I wanted more answers, I could go there to them and get tested. I'm like, I don't want to push them through any more testing. I don't care that he has this genetic problem. He doesn't need to be a guinea pig in the lab. He's alive and he's here and he's thriving. So we're okay. And he's like, okay, but it's always there if you want it.
Are you still having to take oxygen tanks like that with you everywhere, or is there a better system?
He actually got old enough to not need it. So like you said, there's unknowns. So now today, so back in the day, it was all, we were like, it was horrible. And we were always talking about, can you imagine a day where we don't have oxygen tanks? Can you imagine a day where we don't have the vents? Can you imagine a day where we don't have to take all this stuff? Right. And we just kept speaking it into praying it and speaking it into being
manifesting it.
Yeah, really. That's how it keeps you going. It's like, and so when we got the okay to wean him off of oxygen, he got off of oxygen. He's been off of oxygen he's almost 3. So he's been off of oxygen for 2 years now. He only needed a year of oxygen, and then he didn't need anymore.
Yeah. Wow.
He doesn't need anymore. And then we started weaning his vent settings down. You need less and less support, because as you get older, your lungs get bigger. They get used to, we started weaning him off the vent. Slowly doing that. That took forever to slowly do. But we came from not even able to detach him from the vent. So doing trait changes with 2 seconds, you had to be really quick. We went from that to, he doesn't need the vent anymore. He just went for a sleep study yesterday and he got cleared to not need it 24/7. So he doesn't need it.
Amazing. So what is he on now? Is it just the trach?
It's just a trach and G-tube. He still has, so as we did more testing here locally and as he progressed, and because he wasn't making milestones, he got diagnosed with CP. So he is officially CP, which is an umbrella term for his body doesn't move the way it's supposed to. And we don't know why. So he's got CP. And then his seizures are under control, but he still has to get checked, even though they are under control. And he has chronic lung disease, which means his lungs are never going to work properly. Even though he doesn't need the vent anymore, he still needs breathing treatment. So he's on 3 different types of breathing treatments twice a day. and best treatments. He gets that 3 times a day and 2 times a day. He used to be 4 times a day. Oh my God. We're so glad when he was able to do it only 2 times a day. Because every time we turned around, it felt like we were doing something that he needed to get done.
I have to say, it's really incredible to have the mindset of it could be worse. It was worse. So I'm grateful that it's not where it used to be.
Well, here's even like a small thing like nobody even thinks of. Okay, so when you put a trach in, they can't talk anymore. The air doesn't move past their vocal cords and you can't hear them. We can hear him a little bit because he has what's called a bypass. Because the surgeon messed up his surgery and made the hole for his trach too big. We didn't want to dispute that one because we're like, you know what? You had it done. We're not going to fight that one. We're going to say, oops to the doctor.
What's done is done.
Yeah, we were done with that one. So, anyways, so since his hole, what's called a stoma, was a little too big, he had what's called blowby. So he could blow air past it every once in a while. You know how a lot of parents get really upset when their kids cry and whine and fuss and they get really irritated? I would kill to hear that. I would have cried if I heard him cry. I have never heard, like now because he's been capped, which is called you cap off the trach and he can push air past the trach and through his vocal cords. That's just happened within this last year. He's been able to make noise and we've been okay to do speech therapy with him and all that stuff this last year. But the first 2 years of his life, I never heard him cry, ever. So I don't hear him laugh. He's just now had that. So for the first 2 years of a child's life, you don't hear anything. And it gets kind of, it's a hindsight thing. And it's really nice actually, because there was a poor mom at an event we were at. We got good at taking him out of the house. So we ended up taking to like small little things. We did the whole Jurassic tour when it was here. We went there and this one kid, baby, was just crying uncontrollably. And the mom looked like she was so embarrassed. And because she was trying to console this baby, and it was just crying. It was just fussy. It was just done with the day and it didn't want to be there. And you could tell it was just really fussy, but the mom felt because it was just scream crying. And Joy walked up to her because we had Alex with all of his glory of his machine. You can't miss Alex. And he was still on the vent and everything. And back then she walked up and she said, "Don't worry about anybody else. We would kill to hear him make that noise."
You're going to make me cry like so much.
She cried. She's like, okay. She goes, "You let that baby cry. It's its way of expressing himself. It is okay." Because there are ones that we would wish we could hear that. So almost every trach mom feels that way. Because that's like the number one thing.
That had never even occurred to me. That is heartbreaking.
Yeah. It's the small things. And you get excited for the small things, like the no oxygen, no vent. He could be having the trach out this next year because he's getting strong enough where he doesn't need it. Because where they're thinking that the trach is actually obstructed. There's two things with the trach. He needs it so that we can suction, but when you put the trach there, it obstructs his ability to swallow. It just naturally does. It's one of the downfalls to a trach.
So he can't learn to swallow unless it's not in.
So they're thinking he might be strong enough to not have it in. So they're going to kind of sort of test that this year to see if he can have it out.
That would be amazing. And then potentially down the road, he might be able to
not have it. Yeah, to talk and to, yeah. So because on top of not being able to communicate, he has CP, so he can't control his arms. So sign language isn't the most best thing for him, even though he's capable of it because his brain is normal. So he actually can communicate with us. It's just really weird how he does it. And he tries to do sign really hard and he can't do it. So his little body gets so frustrated with itself because he can't move his body the way he wants to. Now it's much easier. We are so excited to the day that today is the day that we don't need to take the ventilator with us, which is one more machine we don't have to take with us. So
that's awesome. So is he in like therapies all day? I can only imagine you've got PT and OT and ST like all the time.
Yeah, we got ultra regional, which we're about to age out of. You're
going to age out of early intervention at 3.
Yeah. So, which is fine with me because we've been having it for so long that I'm kind of over it. I've learned what I need to learn about it. And he's kind of, like I said, he's his own unique case. They don't have they have to have expectations for him, but they really don't because they don't know what he's going to do and what he's going to be able to do. So they only push him so far. They don't push him to the extreme because they can't. He can't tell you when it hurts. I understand when it hurts him. So they're very gentle with him because of that. So yeah, we have all the therapies. We have speech. We have eye therapy. We have physical therapy, and then we have the sensor therapy. She's OT. He loves his OT person. She's great. I love her. They all come to my house because of my situation, and also because of COVID. They are not allowed. They were a video for the longest time because of COVID. But yeah, so they come, and I have them every other week, and I have 2 of them pair up together because it's just a lot for me. So I and physical therapy pair up together.
Yeah, therapy like that can be so overwhelming.
Yeah, because it's an hour each time, and so we have 1 week where we just have therapy, and then I have a week and a half where I don't have it. I do that on purpose because I get it out of the way. So yeah.
Tell me how you sought sunshine in this whole thing. Tell me about what an amazing miracle he is.
It is in the little things. So you don't take the little things for granted. Like I said, the whole crying thing, walking, he doesn't walk, he doesn't crawl, he wriggles around on the ground. He is getting where he can now. So he's starting to. So it's the little tiny milestones for us that show us that he's improving. So seek the sunshine in the little things. Don't take them for granted. So yeah, just taking the sunshine in the little things and not giving up. So giving up, they would have let me die. Yes, they would have.
That is just such an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing it with me.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just one half. There's 3 people behind me, and my husband is one of them because he has his own ups and downs. So, and he's been there through the whole thing too, just in different ways with Amelia at home by himself, taking time off of work. It takes a village. It really does.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And
no problem.
You're just amazing. I just can't, I'm just so in awe of everything that you do and how selfless it is that you've just dedicated your entire life and every moment. Like, not just like mothers dedicate their whole lives. It's true. And certainly I have, but every single moment, I mean, you have to suction them out every few minutes. It's just the level of hypervigilance that's required is astounding.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just, my outlook is, if the enemy tried this hard to take him, I'm going to try this hard to keep him alive. There's your reason.
I'm just blown away. I'm just totally blown away. Anyways, it was so great to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
Don't forget to join us next week on Seeking Sunshine.
'Cause I'm seeking sunshine. I'm seeking sunshine. I'm seeking sunshine. Oh, 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 oh. I'm seeking sunshine. I'm seeking sunshine. I'm seeking sunshine. I'm seeking sunshine.